we're giving you is some information of how to feel prepared for those unexpected situations, things that didn't even cross people's minds really till they happen.
We're really looking at being proactive instead of reactive. And unfortunately, with this challenge, that there is the reactiveness. Again, we need to be prepared for the reactive, but what is that? It's proactive.
Right. So let's talk about a couple scenarios. So we were brainstorming, Dominique and I, brainstorming some scenarios that have shown up authentically and some scenarios that could show up in the work that you do.
Right.
So traditionally, I think a lot of our audience members are in private practice or an office setting, and that makes it nice and clean because it's usually a one-to-one connection.
Correct.
It'd be like Dominique and I doing an interaction, just the two of us. But something that showed up in one of the questions from last week is we had a clinician say, well, what if I do couples work and this shows up in the room with two people? So whether that's a opposite sex or same sex couple or even like a non-traditional, just second person, a support person, how do we navigate that? So I want to invite you to start by talking about a scenario where this happened and maybe there were some things that were challenging about that. So let's set the tone of how this can look and then talk about what we would like to happen.
Okay. So in my practice, I do home visits, I have an office, and I also do telehealth. And today, a lot of the non-traditional places that I meet people, I meet them where they're at, could be outside or could be in their homes. And again, when somebody's starting to talk about this, they are feeling safe. So somehow, and I know how actually, is that we have created a circle of safety that they are now starting to say, hey, you know what, I feel comfortable enough to sit down and tell you what's going on. So there's two scenarios that this has come up several times. One is a couple situation, and one is when I'm working with an entire family group. And then there is another situation, which we can touch on also, is that when I have facilitated groups, this has actually come up. And how do you not have the situation derail when you have a group of people who are not intimately connected only through that group process?
Right.
So there's three scenarios that I'd love to go ahead and touch on.
Okay.
So the first one is the couple situation. Now, I've had several times that this has come in. Normally, this is a couple in conflict. Okay, I do premarital counseling, and normally that is a happy time for them to come in, and they're working towards this agenda.
Right.
So again, I'm not talking about the premarital counseling. What I am talking about is the conflict couple counseling. So two things have shown up that there is. The conversation is kind of coming to a head where there is a behavior, and the one party of the couple says, "I'm tired. You don't do," and again that it kind of spirals out of control, where we figure out, oh my goodness, there is something really internally going on.
So that language that can feel so innocent, which is acknowledging a feeling, I'm tired, actually starts a conversation that's much deeper.
Absolutely. And there's two responses, and I've had both when I've worked with couples. One of them is that the other party is able to sit down and hear them actually sit down and say, and I think it's because there's a third party witness, and I have facilitated that conversation to kind of the stop and listen, the pause, and clarifying and reframing. And those are very, very successful when you have taught the clients how to go ahead and communicate. That's part of the conflict resolution that you're doing, is communication. And then as they're learning, you've opened it up a little bit so they can come in and say, hey, this is really where I'm scared. I'm scared with myself. I'm scared that, and something that happens normally. We talk about driving, and again, mommy. I'm going to use a female in this case. Mommy gets out of hand driving. I yell at people or road rage, and that's again when we're talking about that language. Also, it's like, how do you manage that rage that's coming up, and then the conversation turns. And then they're saying, hey, I'm not comfortable. I mean, I'm not safe with myself. Yes, and I want to sleep. You're always sleeping. Well, that helps me escape. And then we open that up.
Yes, yes.
And the other partner, and again, I was using a female example, but it's happened on both ends with that. Mm-hmm. So that was a very positive, and we could go ahead and work forward through that.
Right. And I'm just struck by the thought of, wow, what an amazing part of this process is creating safety so they can actually own and be authentic with that feeling of like, this is so much deeper than just me saying I'm tired, I'm trying to escape something, or I'm just overwhelmed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, on the flip side, I wish that if we had to have that scenario, that everyone ended up as positive as that is. Yes, I am learning here. I'm going to be listening
That's the ideal.
That's the ideal. And unfortunately, the opposite has happened. Whereas the accusation, when something comes up and says, "Hey, I'm tired. I'm hopeless. I'm helpless." Again, the words that you start seeing in many different forms, and the other person retaliates and says, "It's all about you," and really, what's happening is that the person is attacking the character and not listening to the other partner and saying, "Hey, I'm fully invested. I'm here for you." Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we see this is that sometimes people come in and it's all about them. And you're trying to go ahead and say it's a we thing. It's not a me and me. We're here working on the we.
Right. And so I feel like what you just painted in my head is this really vibrant picture of a miscommunication that can go really wrong of like, oh, I think it's about you and I need to be heard too and seen, and the dynamic just starts to shift.
Right. And again, when that comes, the dynamic, when I'm realizing that both parties are actually asking, "Hey, I need to be seen, I need to be seen," and I'm attending to both of them.
Right.
But then within that, there is the positive that we go ahead and say, I see that we need to attend to you, and I see we need to attend to you. Can we come back together here? Again, within that couple's counseling that you are really you're working with two people trying to get that for them to come back.
Right. It almost sounds like you're modeling the communication for them, because you have to almost like name, okay, this person is someone that we now need to assess because they've said something that is concerning. Mm-hmm. And I almost can see from what you've shared so far that you'd have to almost let the other partner know, like, I'm not going to focus on you for this moment. This is really important. I need your help.
Right. And yes, and exactly. I'm actually bringing them as part of the solution, because the hard part is that everybody's feeling alienated. Mm-hmm. Now, unfortunately, there are those couples where alienation, it's all about the individual, and the couple is kind of a byproduct of it when it best suits me.
Gotcha.
And I want to be very respectful. There are so many different types of marriages and relationships and partners and spouses. Everybody, it's unique and wonderful. My main concern, is that it is positive to and respectful to each person.
Right.
So if it's all about you and you're not thinking about the best interest of the person in front of you, which is your partner, and you're saying, I don't care about you, that's a problem. Mm-hmm. And then when you have the other person saying, I'm not being heard, but I'm really struggling because I don't want to be, not only do I not want to be in this relationship, but I don't want to be part of any relationship. I don't want to be a part of life.
I don't want to be alive.
I don't want to be alive. Yes. And again, is this an everyday occurrence? Is this something that comes into my office weekly? No, it doesn't. But it is more often. It is more often, probably 2-3 times a year that I have a couple that is truly struggling with that. Where normally, and I really have to help them understand that there's language that we're using when we're trying in conflict resolution that you're trying to kind of stay away from. Mm-hmm. Is that, and again, I am part of that education for them. Right. So it's death by suicide. We don't joke about it. Oh, I could just kill myself. Whoa.
Right, or I could just die.
I could just cry. All right,
express emotion.
Mm-hmm. I'll kill you if you got. And these are kind of easy ways, joking. Well, I was just joking. Mm-hmm. I was just joking. When you're working on a problem, we kind of have to look for that language and kind of change it.
Right.
So that is something where I have to go ahead and assess, like I could just kill myself. I could just shoot myself in the head, or I just shot myself in the foot. Well, again, that is language that we don't want, the cognitive behavioral part of it, we don't want to think it, because then the body will follow. It's kind of like the body will follow if you think it. So let's kind of try to remove that and say, hey, I'm really frustrated at this situation. Because again, we want people to really start talking about their emotions and be free. Again, I mentioned it in another webinar that you did, that anger is a very productive emotion to have, and anger moves things forward. So if we can go ahead and instead of saying I'm going to hurt myself, okay, or I'm going to kill myself, if we can identify and say I'm really frustrated with the situation right now, and that's as counselors, as helping professionals, that's part of our responsibility to hear that and to say, okay, can we practice this, or can we role play that?
Sure, because just the emotional intelligence that goes with it.
Right. And once we have buy-in, because once we have buy-in from either partner into the agenda, all of a sudden you see that I've got support, which I didn't think I had before.
Right. So what I think you're also highlighting is something we talked about in the first webinar, which is that suicide is a lot more about pain than it is about death. Right?
Inescapable.
So when you have these partners or people sitting together and one is expressing that pain and not being hurt by the other, I can imagine that is so painful, just to continue to have it be reinforced as like, you don't see me, you don't hear me, you don't care. Because so many of our young couples are telling us they already feel isolated and they don't feel like anyone cares.
And it's really hard. It's heartbreaking to see someone who feels that they are even more alone within a couple or within a family. And as a clinician working with people and more than one person in front of me, I have to be mindful of that, because I don't want to increase their isolation. So, I'm constantly aware and working to make sure that there is a coming together with it, instead of, because I never want people to feel that we're ganging up. It's like, that's not my position.
Not two against one.
No, never, never, never. And again, when you're coming to go ahead and visit with me, work with me, there are some ground rules that I am very, very vocal. If you haven't noticed that I do like to talk and I do like to explain a lot, psychoeducation solution focus is really where I feel is a strength of mine.
So your bread and butter. Got it.
Yeah, it's my bread and butter. That's what I like to do.
So here's where I have a question for you. So you've given us a scenario of the best possible reaction from a partner or spouse, which is I'm here, I recognize you're going through pain, let's work through this. And you've given us a negative example, which is where they discount the emotion and they say, you're making it all about you, and that's selfish, is kind of how I'm summarizing that. As a clinician, since most of our viewers are clinicians, what are some examples of the language you use to re-engage the partners to work together? How do you go through that conflict resolution to say, this is important and we need to address suicide right now that's here in the room, and get the buy-in of that second partner who might be feeling like this isn't relevant to them?